Hello and welcome back to Watching Brief for the week of the 16th of September 2024. I am joined as ever by my co-host, Mr. Andy Brockman, and together our ongoing Watching Brief this week has really turned my head. I was quite surprised. Andy's been working very hard. No, that's not what I'm surprised about. I'm surprised. I was surprised. The fruits of his hard work, his labours, that the contents of an article that he's been working on and some of the quotes therein in a background conversation that we were having on this actually came to pass. I remember at one point saying, "Well, that's your headline. Surely this quote, one of the quotes anyway today. I don't know if he's used it as a headline, dear reader, but." We're talking about metal detecting, aren't we? And what I should say, just for anyone at home and everyone at home who you should be accustomed to this by now, but the caveat is not all metal detectorists are problematic. Many metal detectorists work very well with archaeological processes, and in fact, lots of archaeological digs require, as part of their research design, metal detectorists on site, for example, to examine the spoil heap to make sure nothing's been missed. So it's not the act of metal detecting that we're commenting on here, but rather, I suppose, a cultural phenomenon, I guess we could say, Andy.
That's right. And just to pick up very quickly the point you've just made, I've worked with metal detectorists for as long as I've been involved in archaeology, which is really since the very late 1970s.
Yeah.
So I am not anti-metal detectorist. That's very, very important to make clear. But what this piece is about, and it started off as one thing and has turned into something rather different, is about a cultural phenomenon in metal detecting in Britain, and particularly in England and Wales, actually. And that is the metal detecting rally. Now, traditionally in, say, England and Wales, the laws are slightly different in Scotland and Northern Ireland. And if you go to Europe, the laws are very different in that metal detecting is basically illegal. In very many European countries, or there are more legal restrictions than there are in the UK. In England and Wales in particular, there is a very permissive regime in that metal detecting for artifacts, even archaeological artifacts, is legal. That is the baseline. Such restrictions as there are relate to primarily the protection of scheduled ancient monuments, where it is illegal, and in fact it's a heritage crime to be caught metal detecting without permission. For example, as part of a recognised academic archaeological excavation. Or material that comes up that it qualifies as treasure under the Treasure Act 1996, as amended in recent years, which basically it's basically material made of precious metals. More than, I think it is, 5 coins made of precious metal found together. And more recently, artifacts that are regarded as locally or nationally significant, regardless of the material they're made of, can also be declared treasure. And that was to pick up anomalies like the famous case of the Crosby Garrett Roman helmet, which didn't contain any precious metal and therefore was sold privately for a very large amount of money and has ended up in a private collection. The idea was that was not acceptable. It was important national heritage that effectively had been privatized. That wasn't how the system was supposed to work, and therefore the Treasure Act has been amended.
Yeah, and I suppose one thing I would say is that we covered the changes to the Treasure Act on Watching Brief on a previous episode. I'll link to that below. But also all of this has an ancient root in treasure trove. We're not going to go into that today, but this is one of the reasons why the focus on precious metal content carried through, I think, and this is why something as seemingly obvious as the Roman helmet.
Crosby Garrett.
That's it. Yeah, and they said Cosby. Roman helmet could slip through the net is because of the ancient focus on gold, silver, platinum, that kind of thing. Yeah.
So basically, metal detecting is a legal practice. Traditionally, has been practiced in the UK for the last 40 or so years, since metal detecting technology became broadly available. And it's derived from things like military mine detectors. The first metal detectorists used adapted surplus military kit.
Okay.
And it's become technologically more advanced over the years until it's now a very big business. But traditionally, it's been carried out by individuals or small local clubs of sort of friends, people from the local area getting together, talking to local landowners. And it has to be the landowner, not the farmer. The farmer might not be the landowner. The farmer might only be a tenant and can't actually give permission. So the landowner has to give permission. But if you get permission from the landowner, and metal detector in jargon, an area where you're allowed to metal detect, the landowner says you can metal detect, is called a permission traditionally. Then if you've got a permission, it would be, as I say, it would be worked over, possibly even over many years, by, say, individuals, local people.
Yeah, and also local. If people, for example, in the Detectorists TV show, they depict a club which is
Yes.
Collectively the owner of certain permissions,
That's right.
and they're jealously guarded as well. So I've had permission on that land for years now, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And it was seen as very bad form to try and poach somebody else's permission.
yeah, precisely. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, and in fact, Mackenzie Crook did his research on Detectorists and the culture that it depicts. It's not a drama documentary, but there are lots of elements within that show, that wonderful, bucolic fantasy of middle-aged blokes out in fields listening for bleeps. But there's a lot that comes directly from current metal detecting, and one of the frictions that came out in metal that was depicted in Detectorists is the modern phenomenon of groups, companies, commercial entities organizing rallies of large number of detectorists who might never have met each other before, but who are simply turning up to pay to be allowed to detect. What happens is these organizations, for want of a better word, and this is the core of the article that I've written and the issues that it raises. These organizations can come in, talk to a landowner, potentially offer far more money than a local club and certainly an individual in return for exclusivity on the land, on the permission. And so what you end up with is, and if you read, if you observe metal detecting social media, that on chat rooms, Facebook, whatever, where you can get in, because a lot of these groups are member only and are highly secretive, for reasons we can discuss. But the situation is that, according to complaints by more traditional metal detectorists, the hobby is actually changing. And now it is very difficult to find a permission in some parts of the country where an individual can go to a farmer and say, can I detect your land, please? To a landowner say, can I detect your land, please? Because a rally company has come in offering, some cases, over £10,000 for access to the land. And to take part, your average metal detecting rally weekender these days costs normally £60 plus, £60 to £80 plus. And for that you might get like a sort of a mini Glastonbury festival almost. There'll be camping fields, there'll be possibly a marquee tent and bar, there'll be possibly live entertainment and so on. This kind of thing I'm going to be talking about in a minute. So that's the background to what to what I've written about here, because, as I say, it's a very live issue in the metal detecting world, but it's also a very live issue in archaeology, because whereas when the PAS, the Possible Antiquities Scheme, was set up, operated through the British Museum, set up in the late 1990s, metal detecting still had quite a close relationship with archaeologists and the PAS's finds liaison officers. These are the regional archaeological experts who have a regional remit to record finds handed in by the public which aren't found as part of an archaeological dig.
Mm-hmm.
A formal archaeological dig. It's the things that are found casually. If you're out walking with a dog and find a Roman coin, you can report it to the PAS. But most of their work involves liaising with and working with metal detectorists. And sometimes they have a very long-standing relationships with individual detectorists going back years.
Mm-hmm.
The issue with rallies is that it is a single rally could overwhelm a finds liaison officer of the Portable Antiquities Scheme with work. Do the maths, because on its website, the Portable Antiquities Scheme says that a finds liaison officer can process roughly, depending on the complexity of the finds, 10 to 20 finds per day and put those finds onto its database. And the whole point is there's a publicly available research database of artifacts, so they're not lost into people's private collections.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've got 500 metal detectorists on a site on a weekend, do the maths. If only a relatively small percentage of those people find artifacts, it will very quickly overwhelm an individual finds liaison officer.
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
so in that sense, it's a massive ramp up in scale in terms of event, in terms of land use intensity, and therefore in terms of possible finds coming out of those events, and into the system.
That's right. And at the moment, the advice, the Portable Antiquities Scheme does not support rallies.
No.
It does not send FLOs to rallies. On its website, the current advice is to have archaeological support on site, so that if anything significant turns up, it can be spotted and there can be an archaeological intervention earlier. And I'll come to that in a minute as another issue.
Mm-hmm.
And also that the individual detectorists make themselves aware of the advice, and then it puts it suggests a charge out rate for a finds liaison officer to attend a rally of £500 a day. Now, but again, there's no regulation which requires archaeological support at a metal detecting rally, and there's certainly no requirement that the archaeologist is a finds liaison officer.
No.
So, and again, there are colleagues of ours who, for example, do support metal detecting rallies because they choose to. Some of them are paid, some of them do it voluntarily. It's a complex area, and there's no consistency.
No,
and that's again one of the issues.
Now, of course, I can recall Mike Hayworth, the previous head of the Council for British Archaeology, the CBA, writing an article towards the end of his tenure, describing the presence of metal detecting rallies as problematic. So it very much is a matter of, at the moment, down to, I guess, the rally that you're working with, and also one's own sense of practice, dare I even say conscience, to the extent to which you might be working with a rally or not. So yes, as you say, there are people who do work with metal detecting rallies, but they've definitely been identified as a, well, back then, a few years ago now, as a growing presence at the very least, and that seems to have continued because, I mean, as you were also describing, this ramping up of this, I guess, a sort of land use intensity. If this was farming, this is switching from ploughing a field to using intensive, large scale machinery on a field, and land needs to be given time to recover. So in that sense, how has this intensity affected the landscape? Both literal and metaphorical.
Some critics would argue quite considerably. that article you mentioned, actually, that Mike Hayworth authored, in fact, he co-authored it with Professor Michael Lewis, who's the head of the Portable Antiquities Scheme. And it was pretty outspoken. It basically said commercial rallies need to be regulated. They are damaging to archaeology, and there are issues around, and again, I'll come to this in a minute in the context of the new piece, but there are issues around accountability, financial accountability, and legality even. So it came out at the end, I think it was in the end of 2021 in British Archaeology, CBA's House magazine, when Mike Pitts was still editor. It was clearly a very it was placed there very deliberately. They wanted the issue in the marketplace, in Archae world, but also it would have been picked up in metal detecting world too. But actually, not very much happened afterwards. No. And if anything, post-COVID, the situation has become even more intense and polarized. But to the extent that if you look at metal detecting social media, there are some metal detectorists who argue that rallies should be banned for two reasons. One is, again, reasons of accountability, financial opacity, but also areas that were once giving up fines are now not returning fines. In some cases, the land has been detected and redetected for over 40 years by individuals, by clubs, and now by the rallycos. And it's effectively been strip mined, according to the critics. And this highlights, for some people at least, that this is a finite resource, which, unlike other finite resources, like fishing, like shooting, it's not licensed, it's not regulated, and this stuff can be basically taken away, never to be seen again. And in fact, some people again would argue that compared to the licensed activities like fishing and shooting, fisheries can be managed to regenerate more fish. Shoots can be managed to provide birds for next year.
Yeah.
Once an archaeological artifact is out of the ground, it's out of the ground forever. There's not going to be another one to replace it.
And in that sense, the farming analogy only goes so far, because you can leave a field in fallow and let it recover. That doesn't happen with archaeological materials, and I suppose maybe this is a little closer to the sort of need for licensing and regulation that surrounds the recovery of mineral wealth out of the ground. In fact, that's definitely something that you cannot do without license.
Gravel digging is an obvious example.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, but gravel is relatively mundane. I'm thinking about gold and lead and other. So in that sense, it is in it a matter of intensity and intensive land usage. Yeah. So where does all this lead us then?
Right. Well, one of the issues that has dogged anyone trying to look at rallies and the impact of rallies is, as I mentioned earlier, the secrecy. Virtually all rally organisers of pay-to-dig rallies have no commercial identity, have no company identity through Companies House. They don't publish accounts. There was a spattering of metal detecting companies formed during the COVID shutdown because they thought they could still claim a business exemption to rallies. And then the moment the COVID restrictions were lifted, the companies were all dissolved. So you've got basically a lack of accountability, both as an entity but also as a financial entity. And you've got no idea who's taking part. You've got the organisers have no obligation to even discuss it with the local archaeology officers at the local planning authority, for instance, or the Portable Antiquities Scheme. Some do. Some act responsibly, others don't. And we can discuss those reasons. So basically, it's very difficult to get information out of rally codes. You have to go on to private groups, either information gets passed on, or it is alleged, for example, some people might have burner accounts that enable them to get onto things without being identified as what they're actually doing. So archaeologists will, sit and monitor,
When you say get onto things, you mean social media groups?
Social media,
yeah.
And in fact, the main vehicle for this is Facebook. Okay. Private Facebook groups are the leading way a lot of rallies are organised. So basically, I'm a metal detectorist. I want to go. I want to. I don't have a permission of my own. I've just bought a new metal detector. And I want to use it, and so I look for somewhere in my area that I can go and use it. I can't get permission of my own, so I see a pay to dig rally is going on, next weekend, organised by the Joe Blogs metal detecting group, and so I sign that up. I sign up to that. The admins let me into the group, and then I get first of all I get the information about the digs, and then I get an opportunity to join the digs, and then usually the day before the dig, I get the just 3 words or the postcode or whatever where the dig's going to be.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's that informal and that secretive.
Yeah, informal, secretive, and in that sense, difficult to preempt and to track. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Historic England have tried to do research. The National Council for Metal Detecting publishes its own figures for metal detectorists, but it doesn't talk about rallies per se very much. It's just, it acts as a vehicle for insurance for most rally companies, and that's another issue that we can maybe discuss. But essentially, you can't FOI a Facebook group.
No.
So all the normal tools that I might use to research a story aren't available to me. I'm reliant on information that's passed on by sources in the archaeological or metal detecting communities, plus a limited amount of material that's in the public domain, which is where this current story came from, because a source passed on some information to me about a company called Just Detect UK. They operate in East Anglia. They grew out of a company which we've actually mentioned on the Watching Brief before, which is Detecting for Veterans, which collapsed a couple of years ago amid accusations of fraud. Now, I can't say any more about that because there's still a live police investigation.
Yeah.
But some of the people who are not in any way connected with the allegations, who were involved in Detecting for Veterans, decided, took the decision that the idea of working to raise money for veterans charities was too good to lose with the collapse of Detecting for Veterans. And so they effectively took the group forward under a different name, under new management, as it were, and have been organising rallies for the last four years or so, principally in the Midlands and East Anglia, where the man who is or has been the lead on Detecting for Veterans, Jason Price, is based. He's a funeral director. He's based in Lincolnshire.
Okay.
And last year, a source passed on some information to me which suggested that members, admins, people who aren't aware, the jargon in a Facebook group for people who actually run the group and let people in or out and post leading articles and so on is admins. A lot of you may be familiar with that, just in case you're not. And the admins in these groups are actually quite important because they're the ones that do the organisation. Anyway, source passed on some information to me that South Kesterton Council, which is a local authority in Lincolnshire, had given, quotes, words of advice to Just Detect UK because they hadn't obtained the proper licenses for entertainment and food and so on for their main metal detecting event last year. So that put them on the radar. Now, I didn't write it up as a story because it wasn't really a story in its own right. It was the kind of thing that, you know, small local groups often get wrong when they're trying to organise a large event, and it's not, you know, they're not bringing down the monarchy.
No, exactly. Yeah,
It shouldn't happen. They should have done their research better, but it doesn't show,
like
you know, the
church some affairs might do the same thing by accident as well. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. It doesn't show any kind of bad intent whatsoever.
No.
It's you know, it's an admin screw up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, that and the connection with detecting for veterans, it's one of those things you just sort of bookmark. Yeah. And then earlier on this year, there was another controversy involving Just Detect UK, which began on other Facebook groups, which again was passed on to me by sources in the community, which this year, Just Detect UK have been promoting their autumn rally, and it happened, well, just last weekend as we're recording, at a farm in Lincolnshire. Back in the early part of the year, there was a, quote, recce on the farm, which turned up some fines. And it was controversial because some people from outside of the group were accusing the group admins of basically getting this permission and then having a jolly and getting first dibs on the site before the paying detectorists turned up in the autumn.
Yeah.
Now, again, that story really sort of ran into the sand because, first of all, most rally groups do what they call recce's, and it involves basically checking a site for green waste, contamination. You know, if you've got a field that's full of green waste and old tractor parts, your paying detectorists are going to get very cross very quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
there's barbed wire under the soil or something. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly that. You know, bits of plowshares that have been thrown by a plow, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's a very common practice to have a recce. It can be controversial because if they suddenly post lots of stuff turning up, and I'm not talking about Just Detective, I'm talking about anybody, but if they suddenly post lots of stuff turning up, it can look as though, like I said, they're having first dibs before at the goodies before the people paying their 60, 70, 80 quid turn up.
Yeah.
At the same time, in this case, people were saying, well, actually, it's perfectly legit, and JD UK, Just Detect UK, and Jason organise good rallies. There's always plenty of land per detectorist, and this is perfectly reasonable. So controversial, nothing much to go with, though. Again, it was a bit of a non-story. So what brought it to a head, though, and what resulted in the current piece was a series of increasingly serious and sometimes lurid accusations that then started to emerge on metal detecting social media about Just Detect UK and Mr. Price in the last couple of months, in the run up to their September rally last weekend. And the accusations included sacking admins who asked questions, and particularly asked to see accounts.
Right.
There were insinuations about money being diverted from the charitable causes, which Just Detect UK states it's set up to support, which basically primarily serve as charities. And the fact that there were no published accounts showing what had gone where to who, when.
Yeah.
There were also allegations of a personal nature which were very hurtful, were denied immediately, and were made the subject of legal threats if they were repeated.
Okay.
So there was something pretty nasty and potentially serious going on if these reports were to be believed. But obviously,
and of course, the moment someone, the personal accusations and this kind of thing, more often than not, should be investigated. Obviously, depending on the nature of what they are. I'm not going to go into the nature of them here. depending on the nature, either should be subject to internal investigation and review, or should be reported to the police if they are serious enough.
Exactly.
But things like accounts, there absolutely is a sort of if not public interest in the strictest sense, certainly there's going to be an interest in terms of service users. So people who are turning up and effectively feeding those accounts, paying money for their day or weekend of metal detecting.
Thinking that money is going directly to a charity, in this case, a service charity.
Yeah, and it often is service charities as well. It often is in support of veterans, this kind of thing. You can see why that was raising eyebrows and why it came to your attention. Yeah.
That's right. And because this information was being put in the public domain and names were being put into the public domain, I decided there was enough here to actually, if not greenlight a story, investigate, take a step further and see if there was actually a story here. Because again, I'm not making any allegations about Just Detect UK here, but that similar allegations have been made about other rally codes. That they use the simplest of structures, like an anonymous Facebook group or a private Facebook group, to organise events that can turn over tens of thousands of pounds in a weekend, with no accountability whatsoever.
Was that a pun?
No account. Yeah.
No, but actually, that is an interesting question as well, isn't it? Because if I was turning over tens of thousands of pounds as a sole trader, which I am, I don't earn enough to be above the income, the VAT tax threshold. If I was suddenly earning that much, then that would be subject to, income tax. It would be a thing that the government, the taxman would want to know about. And obviously, I'd have to report, and I do self-report my incomes and outgoings for tax purposes. But
me too.
But you too. But can a Facebook group in that sense?
This is the point. That these groups have no existence outside of Facebook. And certainly, as far as the authorities are concerned, they might as well not exist unless they're reported for some kind of alleged malpractice. So, it's an area which has become increasingly controversial, and particularly as this area of metal detecting practice has grown, the numbers involved have grown, the amount of money being turned over has certainly grown. Just in the time I've been looking at it, rally weekenders increased in price from sort of 40-50 quid to 70-80 quid, and more. Some of them are even offering sort of camping glamping.
Which in other circumstances would come with things like ground licensing,
planning permission, all the rest,
and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely.
A watching brief is a formal programme of observation and investigation to record and report on notable discoveries on an archaeological site. As part of our ongoing watching brief, Andy and I work hard to bring you the best, the worst, and sometimes the more quirky happenings from the world of archaeology. We aim to provide a space where voices can be heard, opinions shared, and sometimes truth spoken to power. If you believe in the work we do, please consider supporting us on Patreon for as little as $1 per month. Thank you. So what happened next then? What did you discover?
Well, I reached out to Jason Price, the organizer. I did so via Facebook Messenger, appropriately, and I said, "Look, these allegations have been put out there. Due diligence. What's your response?" And I listed various questions, and Jason texted me back almost straight away saying, "Can we talk?" So of course, I said yes. And in the course of a long telephone conversation last week and then subsequent text conversations, we explored the various issues. And he had some very interesting things to say about metal detecting rallies in particular. Now, it's not, and the article I've written is not a piece knocking Just Detect UK, and it's certainly not a piece knocking Jason Price. What it is, what it's grown into, is a whole series of conversations for both, and questions for both archaeologists, but also metal detectorists. Because I'll just give you a flavour of the kind of things that we talked about. Obviously, I addressed the issues of accountability and so on. And the first thing I asked him was, look, when you set up Just Detect UK, you said it was going to have a corporate structure. You said it would have named directors. You said it would publish accounts. You'd learn from the mistakes of the companies that have gone before, and particularly, the collapse of Detecting for Veterans. And he admitted, yes, that those undertakings had been made, but no, that's not what had happened. It had remained a private Facebook group. And he be able to explain why. He just sort of explained how it had morphed out of Detecting for Veterans, and that it was what it was.
Well, not to labour the point, but that doesn't cut mustard when you've got a massive turnover like that. Surely, again, not specifically bashing a particular group or person, but that's interesting. So what are we going to say next? Go on.
Well, we sort of explored those issues, and I said, look, do you get that lack of accountability, the fact that you operate through a private Facebook group, it makes people suspicious. There may be nothing to see here. You may donate all this money to charity, and he quoted figures of money that they donated to charity in the past, and quite big figures that would have made a real difference to the often sort of small service charities that Just Detect UK chooses to support. Their argument is that they support smaller charities where they can make a real difference, rather than just throw lots of money into a big pot like Help for Heroes. So, not that that's not a good cause. It's just that in terms of how you choose what you do in this area, and how to support the causes you choose to support. I thought that Jason would argue with me on that. But he basically said he agreed. And I said, well, look, do you think it's sustainable to continue organising in this way? And he said no.
So can we just be clear about that then? Sorry, what did he think, and what were you referring to as not being sustainable?
Organising events which turn over tens of thousands of pounds via a private Facebook group which never publish accounts.
Okay. So are we hinting that it's not sustainable in terms of good business practice, legality, or just customers having patience with you?
There's a payoff here, okay. And I'll sort of save that to the end, I think. But yes, I mean, his stance was certainly that this isn't a sustainable way of carrying on. Okay. Yeah. Now he also said that as of this year's event, he'd stepped back from direct financial control of the event and he'd hand it over to other people. One of the accusations was that he was controlling it all directly himself, and certainly two of the founder admins who had walked away from Just Detect UK and made some of the allegations were alleging that. He denies that.
What's interesting here is that he's using language, and language is creeping in here, that you find in community interest companies who have
Yeah.
steering groups, so named individuals who will monitor the activities of the company and whether or not it's
Yes.
meeting its stated goals and aims, in this instance,
Yes.
presumably donating to charity. But also, as well, it's creeping in is a sort of corporate language where people within the presumably private Facebook group are asking him to step back from direct financial controls and this kind of thing, like some sort of CEO of a Fortune 500 company or something like that. Again, it's a
Yeah.
private Facebook group. So those people themselves are equally unaccountable and unnamed,
Yes. Yes.
as you would expect from a boardroom or a steering group. You'd expect those people to be known and named.
Yeah.
So again, this is interesting language that's creeping in.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I mean, the admins are named on the Facebook group.
Right.
I've got a printout of the current admins, who
Did,
most of whom are relatively new.
did I'm guessing not. Do they submit minutes of their meetings? Do they, in that sense, they're behaving like people
This is
who are beholden to shareholders?
this is the thing. This is the thing, and this is the situation that has been allowed to arise by both metal detecting world and archaeology world and the financial and legal authorities in the UK that regulate business. No, this situation has been allowed to develop over a number of years because nobody has actually seen it necessary to grasp the nettle, as it were. Until now, it's starting to come to a head, I think.
But presumably, by the sound of it, because it's grown so large, it's unwieldy.
This is the point. Now, I said earlier that one of the problems was getting hard information, and one of the things that came out of the conversation with Jason Price was some hard information, albeit obviously this is all from Mr. Price, and again, I've not got accounts to verify it, so I'm taking him at his word at the moment. But I checked all these quotes with him. I checked all the figures with him before publishing.
Okay.
And basically, he claims that in the 3-4 years that Just Detect UK has been organising events, they've donated approximately £52,000 to charity.
Okay.
Now, in terms of this year's event, though, and this is where it gets really interesting, because getting up-to-date figures about rally events and what they cost is virtually impossible. But what Jason Price told me was that this year he expected to take something like £40,000 directly from participants paying on the gate to attend.
Sorry, 4T.
£40,000.
And he works. This isn't his job.
No, he's a funeral director.
He's a funeral director. Yeah. Okay. Wow.
And he's very proud of being. He told me he was very proud of the service that he can provide to people at the worst time of their life.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, that is wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. As on top of that £40,000 gate money, he estimated there'd be about another £10,000 raised from the sale of raffle tickets. We're talking about an event that could have up to 500 detectorists.
Okay. This is an aside. This isn't the focus of your writing, I know. But are there potentially rules there surrounding running of lotteries, etc.?
You're right. It's not a core part of the current piece, although it might be ongoing, because raffle tickets and raffles and other gambling associated with metal detecting is a sub-industry all of its own, and it's one I'm also looking at.
Okay.
But what's also interesting about this, so we're talking about approximately £50,000 coming through the gate.
Yeah.
Or coming into the company over the course of a 3-day event.
Yeah.
Now,
sorry, into the Facebook group, not the company, into the Facebook group.
You are right to correct me. Into the entity which is Just Detect UK.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, and this is where it starts to get interesting, because he also gave me figures on the overheads, which we almost never get. And so, of that 50 grand, about 3 grand goes to raffle prizes. Loos, fire extinguishers, marquees, staging and hiring bands and so on. That's about another 6,000. And the landowner gets 11,000.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Now you can see there how an individual metal detectorist asking for permission can no way compete with that.
No. 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 And it's interesting.
And
It's interesting because this is a trend that you see in formal industry, isn't it? So, for example, a friend of mine runs a tour company. He does walking tours, and someone has come in from Sheffield and is going around sort of offering to buy everyone up from within the tour guide sector within the city, pay them half rates, but because he's now the only game in town in terms of providing footfall. See what I mean? This sort of jump in scale can often lead to a dramatic reduction in on the ground quality, and it's very much I don't mean just to say capitalism bad, but it's very much a capitalism bad sort of phenomenon, isn't it? Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Now, again, just to step back to UK, that taking those figures as final, and in fact, Jason Price has promised to share the final figures with us.
Okay.
And I look forward to that. But as things stand on the provisional figures, there's something like £30,000 to be dispersed, however the organizer of the group sees fit.
Right.
Now, I'll leave those there for people to make their own minds up about. Really.
So one more question. I know that you touched on that there were comments made about how the group would be run when the previous iteration shut down or fell into legal trouble. Are there formal wages? Like, are people effectively being paid for their time out of that money as well? You say there's £30,000 to be dispersed as the group sees fit, but is anyone, effectively on salary, I guess?
That nobody's on salary. No. At least the undertaking when Just Detect UK was set up was that nobody would be on salary. It was commented that the organisers would take expenses to cover their costs in actually genuinely what is quite a considerable amount of work, but of course there's no oversight of that.
No.
And certainly Mr. Price didn't go into that when we were talking. But just to move it on and just to move this to a conclusion and maybe leave some questions with our audience. I went back to the issue of the accusations and what Mr. Price felt about those. He denied that he'd sacked any of the admins, and in fact the two founder admins who had walked and made accusations, a man called Steve Murphy and another man called Paul Eddie Edwards, he claimed that actually they both left of their own accord. Okay. Now, I reached out to both of them. I've not received any response as yet.
Right.
He also said that he'd offered other members of Just Detect UK the opportunity to take on the organisation of the group, but nobody wanted to do it. He said the current admin team are fantastic, but they're not charity specialists, and none of us need these accusations every single time. And then I said, what do you put down then? Why do you think people are making these accusations? And I think the comment he made then, in terms of what it says about the hobby of metal detecting and perceptions of people within the hobby of metal detecting, are really interesting. And I'm quoting here. I asked Jason Price what he felt about the what caused the allegations, and he replied, quote, jealousy. And then he extended that comment by saying, quote, it's a vicious, vicious world. In any part of the hobby, there are the most ferocious people. Now, obviously, he's speaking from a very particular point of view. He also told me that the whole thing had caused him a lot of stress. It was affecting his mental health, which is understandable given the nature of some of the allegations that were being made. But this is somebody from within metal detecting talking about other people within metal detecting. Cynics might say, well, actually, it's just like archaeology. It's backbiting and feuding. But this is obviously, it's serious stuff. Mustn't make too light of it. And
it's serious stuff that we need to balance and needs to be balanced with a serious structure of support for people involved in it, but also of accountability, presumably. I mean, it reminds me of Amdram. So I know a few people who run who've been involved in amateur dramatics over the years. I know you have a sideline in lighting for stage production.
Well, I had a professional involvement in, and maintained a professional involvement in,
and within those areas, you have passionate people who've all bringing to the table often multiple skills that mean that they've been able to, for reasons of their own enthusiasm, been able to apply themselves to setting up a show. They have an opinion on how the lighting should be done. They have an opinion on how the director should be directing. They reckon that they can source props or costumes more effectively than possibly the costumier for that particular show might do. And because everyone both wants the best thing to happen, the best show for the most part, even if it only means that the person on stage they want themselves to look like an excellent actor on stage. You can have these tremendous frictions where the people who are in charge are being undermined. There are people who aren't quite in charge who everyone looks to for leadership and for effectively direction. And you have people joining these groups who have no clue about the boiling, simmering tensions that exist in this what appears to be some sort of power structure, but is in fact actually about to explode because of, well, as you just said, words like jealousy, words like people being aggressive or being horrid and this kind of thing.
And as you made the point, you were talking about Amdram, we're talking about metal detecting. It is just a hobby.
Yeah. Well, just a hobby, but also as well, the other factor here that always gets drama in a group is when there's money involved, and seemingly when people want to know what's happening with money as well.
I think this is where this is where to end, because yes, at the root of this is money, undoubtedly. And I'm stepping outside. I'm stepping away from that conversation with Jason Price at the moment, and this is my opinion, having looked at this for many years now, and this case in particular.
So we're talking about Rallies in that sense.
Rallies in general, yeah. These are big businesses. You've got. Jason Price talks about an event that turns over around 50 grand in a weekend. That could be a sole trader, even a small commercial enterprise might turn over that amount of money, but certainly not in a weekend.
Maybe 4 years for me, possibly.
Well, yeah, exactly. Viewers, get out your violins.
Yeah, viewers go to Patreon. Yes.
Yes, exactly. Yes, we can't offer you the opportunity to find the nation's heritage, but we can offer you Patreon.
Yeah.
But no, in all seriousness, it's about it. that I'm sure this would not be happening at this level if there wasn't money involved. And even with even if there's no, certainly I'm not alleging any impropriety in the case of Jason Price, and there's no evidence of that. And in fact, as I've explained, it's very difficult to come up with any evidence for any rally code that they're behaving inappropriately. That said, it's very difficult, as I've said, to come up with any evidence whatsoever. And the suspicions remain. I mean, look, I think it's probably time to wind up with a final piece of sort of hard commentary that people can take as they will. And it goes back to the issues of rallies and sustainability, and whether rallies can continue in their current form, given the criticisms, both in terms of their legal structures and financial arrangements, but also what they may be doing to the nation's archaeology. In terms of, as we said, in the worst cases, completing the strip mining of parts of the country of antiquities in the ground, with no compulsion to report, so that data is lost forever.
I suppose one minor caveat there is that the compulsion to report is down to the individuals, and there will be many different individuals doing different things in terms of reporting.
Yes. But one argument, for example, is, I'll just throw this out there very quickly, is that TV series like Detectorists and the publicity given to large treasure awards has led to an influx of people coming into the hobby thinking it's a surer bet than betting on the horses. And have no background in metal detecting whatsoever, don't understand the relationship between metal detectorists and the portable antiquities scheme, but there's no training, like we talked about earlier. You had to go do your online course as a drone pilot. There's no equivalent for a metal detectorist.
No. Well, and in fact, every year I have to sort of effectively repass the test.
Yes. Exactly. And as I say, even people within metal detecting think that the situation isn't sustainable, and Jason Price certainly thinks the situation isn't sustainable, because in conclusion, what he told me was, and I'm quoting again, "I can see regulation coming where rallies have to be within clubs and a fines liaison officer on site and archaeological attendants as well. So much is lost to irresponsible digging," and he stressed that they try to be responsible. Then he added,
"It's interesting that he's saying that."
Oh yeah,
because often the word you get, from the community, often the word you get is there's only a few bad apples, a few bad actors. He's saying so much is lost too.
Absolutely, and that won't go down well with the National Council for Metal Detecting either, because they are adamantly against regulation of any kind. Beyond what we've already got. And in fact, they have a fighting fund to fight treasure cases where they argue that the Treasure Valuation Committee and the Portable Antiquity Scheme will be overextending their remit to try and make more things classified as treasure than subject to the Treasure Act than already are. So he said that he argued that he could see regulation coming, and he said he's not that comes, that's not just his own opinion, it comes from discussions with colleagues. And then he added of Just Detect UK, he'd already told me that this year's rally was probably the last one in its current form. And then he said, quote, "Just Detect UK is too big, and some groups are even bigger, much bigger. With folk turning up simply to take away a gold coin or artifact without proper thought for items to be being recorded." He said, in conclusion, "Many clubs need to slim down numbers. We will be one of the first to do it."
Right. Interesting. I suppose you could say, I'm just thinking, if I was another member of that Amdram group, looking in at another Amdram group who's talking about slimming down, you could say that that's just one person's perspective. You could say that that maybe they just don't have sustainable or popular enough business practices, and so on and so forth. So in that sense, this is an interesting data point, certainly, isn't it? But
Yes.
it requires more ongoing observation, I think, to make it an absolute statement of fact, I suppose, doesn't it? But certainly, it's certainly poignant.
Absolutely.
Certainly poignant, though. Yeah.
I think it's the first time I've seen this kind of commentary coming out of the metal detecting community, and particularly from somebody who is, as he says, not the biggest organizer of metal detecting rallies, but one of the most high profile in terms of what they do and where they've come from, and so on. And so to have that kind of commentary coming from them, I think it is significant. Again, too early to talk about tectonic plates moving, but as I say, I think the comments will prove controversial, both among archaeologists and among metal detectorists, some metal detectorists, probably for very different reasons, actually. But even so, to actually have this kind of commentary and hard figures, or at least hard figures being quoted, coming out, that is certainly, it's a data point. It probably moves the debate on.
Yeah. Okay. So what's next then, as far as you're concerned?
Well, I mean, I'm going to be staying in touch with Jason Price. He's promised me the final figures to clarify those issues. We'll be watching what happens with Just Detect UK. We'll be watching what happens with other detecting detecting groups. I'm looking at other cases, and when we've got evidence that's strong enough to publish on a relevant story, we'll do it. I think, again, stepping back from Just Detect UK, I'm getting the sense that in the community of professional archaeology, and mostly because of rallies, actually, there's an increasing willingness to criticize metal detecting as a hobby, and to say that the status quo that was held since the beginning of the portable antiquities scheme can now no longer hold, because, as we discussed earlier, with these large-scale rallies turning over lots of money, with no accountability or accounts, and no no obligation to report fines, plus other suggestions that, for example, artifacts are turning up that are clearly from burials, but burials aren't being declared. And obviously excavating a burial without a license is illegal. That metal detecting is coming under increasing scrutiny, and many archaeologists are increasingly unwilling to cut metal detectorists the slack that they've enjoyed in the past. And in fact, just this week, as I was writing my piece, Dr. Tess Mackling published an article about the impact of metal detecting on her particular field of research on Iron Age talks. And it's a powerful piece of work. Well, we can link to it. I'll urge people to go and read it.
Okay, cool. Well, that has been this week's watching brief. Hopefully you found it interesting. As I say, I was quite astounded by some of the content and certainly some of the quotes that came forward from this bit of work. And it's hard not to be like, well, that's the way. That's the sort of the way that we've always suspected it is within the groups. It is difficult not to, but I think one of the easiest ways to counter that, if that needs countering as a characterization of how metal detecting private Facebook groups work, is to be more open, and to have things like public accounts, or to have a more liberal relationship with outsiders. Is basically more of an open relationship with people who are just curious about what's going on within these groups, and particularly how it is that the rallies work as well. Maybe people are suspicious for no good reason, and it's all wonderful and above board. But we just don't know for the most part, do we? No.
Okay, can I just make one final point, and it's just a legal point. If a metal detectorist goes into a shop at Christmas and buys a charity Christmas card, there is more legal protection on that charity Christmas card, in that the point of sale has to display the charity that the money is going to and how much of the price is going to the charity.
Yeah.
Where, they have more protection buying a Christmas card than they do going on one of these rallies.
Yeah.
In terms of where their money's going.
They have more protection buying a lottery ticket. Actually. Yeah, in terms of and how much lottery money goes to charity as well.
Yeah, well, that's another good analogy.
Yeah. Right, guys.
Which is not to say that rallies don't donate lots of money to charities. It's just, as I say, the questions around it and the circumstances that we need to have the conversation about, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right, guys. Well, thank you for watching. Please do comment below if you have any thoughts or opinions. Do keep the comments civil. This particular topic can often result in passionate back and forth, but keep the comments approachable and productive and constructive.
And actually, I would add, I hope I've shown that the pipeline is a responsible outlet. ArchaeoSoup, the watching brief, is a responsible outlet. We're fair. And if anyone has information about any of these issues that we've been discussing in this particular watching brief, and you want to contact us privately, there are ways to do it. And please do feel that you can. We're very interested in hearing from you.
Yeah. And in that sense, Price has agreed to be named. That's why we're able to name him.
Yes.
Yes. If there's anything else that you think we should cover or that you'd like to see us cover, please also do get in touch. Email on screen. You can contact us via various social media points and also on Andy's Pipeline website. There is a mode to do that with hyper secure proton mail, unhackable, quantum computing.
Well, it's end-to-end encrypted, and it's not Elon crapping on about cats.
Exactly. Anyway, guys, until next time, do take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.